Shalom and welcome back. Here we are in America's Chosen Network, JLTV, and like we like to do quite often is talk rabbinics with a rabbi. But this is not just any rabbi. This is sort of a quasi-traveling rabbi. It took him a while to get to what we call Jewish Hollywood. And we're happy to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me, Phil. It's a pleasure.
I don't know if our viewers across America, they maybe look at those of us who ended up on the Pacific coastline as being a little nutty, but it's a great community, and you are participating at a synagogue who emanates with the thought of Jacob Ott, who is an amazing personality in Los Angeles and around the world, actually. How does it feel to take the next step?
It's a great responsibility and a great privilege. It's a very special synagogue. In some ways, it's far from being the quintessential American synagogues. We have a lot of first-generation immigrants and their children. When you walk into our services or Kiddush, you can hear Farsi and Arabic and Ladino and Hebrew and French and maybe even English sometimes and Turkish. So it's a very special place.
When you look at, I have friends that belong to the synagogue, which has the word Sephardic in the title, but in actuality, Jacob Ott, who we just mentioned, was Ashkenazi. There's been this kind of freedom of the congregation to embrace not just the Sephardic community, but the whole Jewish community. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if this Ashkenazi community is that graceful.
Well, I'm not sure I can answer the latter part of your question and remark.
I feel like a CNN reporter when I said,
but
I didn't mean it that way.
Oh, sure. But I think Rabbi Jacob Ott of blessed memory, whom I was not privileged to meet, made incalculable efforts to really integrate himself into Sephardic culture and customs. He became very proficient in the Ladino. In my case, being Israeli, coming from the Middle East, I feel a natural affinity to the warmth, to the unmediated, informal kind of interactions that we have at the Sephardic temple. Having lived in different countries, in France and England,
But you don't have an accent.
Yeah, when I moved here, I had a British accent, but I assimilated my dialect after a year.
That's Hollywood.
I guess it's part of it, yeah.
What is it about Hollywood, now that you've been here a little bit? It does change the aura, the landscape of where we're at. I mean, people are all around the world are celebrity crazy.
I think that there's tremendous energy in this city. This city is a magnet for talent. It's also a magnet for people who are very charismatic and energized. And I think for people who are drawn to spirituality, it's a matter of harnessing and channeling this energy into godliness, into spiritual intensity, and into kindness and compassion in our personal interaction. I think the energy that we have here can be harnessed in a very powerful way, because Hollywood, in a sense, represents a global culture. If we get a chance to influence that culture, we got to influence world culture and world consciousness. Of course, it's not by chance that even the Kabbalah Center, like it or not, decided its headquarters would be in Los Angeles for the very same reason.
It's jumping around just a little bit, because this is the most fun way to communicate and make new friends, is we have something in common strongly, and that is an admiration for Theodor Herzl, who spells his name without an E at the end. Most people, it's like Chaim Weizmann. Chaim Weizmann, the first president of Israel, and the nephew, Ezer Weizmann. Ezer Weizmann dropped off an N to not be so Germanic. Here's Theodor Herzl, who I don't think he dropped the E out for any reason. But what is it that you give your admiration to Theodor Herzl? What is it about this unusual personality?
Well, for me, really getting to know Herzl, so to speak, the human being, obviously passed away in 1904, was through a book by one of the finest Israeli journalists of all times, Amos Elon, whom, after he passed away, Tony Judd of the New York Review of Books described as the prophetic Israeli. And Amos Silon wrote a stunning biography of Herzl. It's one of the few books in my life that I, as we say in Israel colloquially, I kind of held my breath as I was reading it. It was so amazing to read about a journalist in Paris in the 1890s, sitting on a bench in the Tuileries Gardens, not too far away from the Louvre Museum, and starts making notes in his personal notebook, sketching out the idea of a Jewish state and moving the bulk of European Jewry back to Israel. And for me to kind of internalize, yes, there was this one guy in the 1890s, in his 30s, a young man, who envisaged the impossible and turned Israel into a living reality subsequently, decades thereafter.
And I know you know the prophetic sentence written in his diary in Basel. Tell us, reiterate what the meaning of that was, because that was powerful.
Right, so Herzl wrote in his journal, in German of course, in 1897, in Basel I founded the Jewish state. And if I were to say it out loud, that a Jewish state will come into being 5 to 50 years from now, people would think I'm crazy. So I'm just writing it in my own personal diary, so to speak. And lo and behold, exactly 50 years thereafter, in 1947, in an international referendum in Midtown Manhattan, the UN decides that there can be a Jewish state alongside an Arab state in the land of Israel.
You know, there's so much change going on in the world, and therefore it touches our Jewish life. We're old, we're steadfast, we're creative, we're all these characteristics. But in reality, we're like any other people. It's confusing times right now. Do you see that in your congregation? I mean, it would seem to me that the rabbis of today are confronted with more personal issues that the congregation has than ever before. Or am I exaggerating that?
Personal issues in terms of struggling with one's Jewishness?
No, struggling with life.
Yes, certainly. I think life becomes more and more complicated. We recently hired a new Hebrew school director who's doing a terrific job. And one of the things she mentioned in one of our meetings is that kids today, in their mid-adolescence, 14, 15-year-olds, start building a resume for college. I see the pressure on these kids and the amount of extracurricular activities that have to be devoted for, and the relentless race to get the right GPA to get into the right college. And it starts earlier and earlier, and this generation is robbed more and more of their childhood. And immediately they start thinking instrumentally. Maybe I'll take this extracurricular activity so when I write an essay to college. So I think certainly there's tremendous pressure on young people today, absolutely. And it also manifests itself it also expresses itself in the way we think about Jewish identity today. One prominent Jewish educator in Los Angeles shared with me that he thinks that today every person of the younger generation is a Jew by choice. Now, being a Jew by choice is a politically correct term for a person who chose to join the Jewish people, what we call a convert. But now, in a sense, those young generations who grow up in privilege in America, in a country that gives every Jewish person complete equality and opportunity, a country whom one of the greatest Orthodox rabbis in American history, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, called a malchut shel chesed, a kingdom of loving kindness. There has never been in our history a place so hospitable to the Jewish people. All the young generation, they're all Jewish by choice. Have to think about what it means to be Jewish, and it's our job as Jewish educators or anybody who is impassioned about Judaism to transmit the vitality, the genius, the joy, the simcha of leading a Jewish existence.
More simcha, more joy, and it's fun to be Jewish. I know it sounds rather crass, but we're so lucky of who we are. I remember a great actor told me once something on the issue of jealousy of the Jewish people and so forth and so on. And he said, you know, I'm not Jewish, but I know some of my friends who are anti-Semitic, and you're only born once. In other words, we were lucky to be born Jewish. It's rather snobbish, but there's something to this, to the statement itself.
I think it's a great responsibility to be Jewish. I think we have it's just a historical fact that Jews were the first monotheists, and it was our historical destiny to proliferate monotheism throughout the world. Christianity emerged from certain Jewish people who invented Christianity and then marketed it to the pagan Roman world. The Prophet Muhammad learned under Jewish people. So we have what one Jewish thinker of our time, Immanuel Levinas, called a difficult freedom and a religion for adults. I think we need to treat it with humility, and I think we need to understand that the privilege of being Jewish is a privilege of obligation, trying to serve humanity and God with excellence, with distinction, but also with great humility.
My last question I choose on purpose because of your relationship to Tel Aviv and where you come from. But I'm getting frustrated. You can be my rabbi now and help me through this therapeutic question and dilemma. I'm rather tired hearing from Jews in America that Israel is terrible when it comes to hasbara and information, where it seems that the Jewish Americans are foisting the issue of bad coverage in the New York Times and CBS to the blame of Israel, when it's really as much of our responsibility to discuss with our Gentile neighbors what the real Israel's all about. It's not just Israel, and why pick on Israel when it comes to propaganda, as we call it, hasbara? Mm-hmm. It's frustrating.
Yeah, it's a very difficult issue. It's a very difficult issue, which reminds me of a joke that Jonathan Netanyahu of blessed memory, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's brother, wrote in one of his letters that were posthumously published. Right before the Six-Day War, he was a soldier in the IDF, and he said, all the soldiers are telling the same joke over and over again, which is that an American, a Brit, and an Israeli are held captive by a tribe of cannibals, and each one gets a last wish, and the Brit asks for fish and chips, and the American asks for a burger with fries, and an Israeli says, just untie my hands for a little bit, I want to feel the blood flow. And then he takes out a machine gun and wipes out all the violent elements in the tribe and saves the other two. And they ask him, what have you been waiting for all this time? And he said, what, am I crazy that I should be condemned in the UN for aggression? So he waited for the last minute. But the fact is, to really answer your question directly, that the best two proponents of Israel in the media were not really Israelis from Israel. First is Abba Ibn, who was born in South Africa and was British. And the second is Benjamin Netanyahu, who grew up mainly in the United States. I think the Israeli approach to life can be encapsulated in one word, which is tachlis. You know, and Israelis say a lot, daber iti tachlis, talk to me tachlis, talk to me about the practicality of things. Israelis are so busy defending their countries, building technologies for the entire world, they have less time to deal with discourses, with theoretical expositions. But what the Israeli government does today, more and more native English speakers from Australia, from the UK, from the United States, are encouraged to take on these hasbara PR positions for Israel.
I have a question from left field. It's not about baseball, but it's about football. Are you a sports fan, by the way?
Sure, yeah. My first religion was soccer. Yeah.
Great. See, if you were born in America, it would be the Minnesota Vikings or something.
Right, right.
But it's great to have you here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me, sir.
You more often, too.
Me too. Thank you very much.
And to those of you across America in all 50 states, we want to also welcome our new almost 4 million homes and viewers in Puerto Rico. We'll be right back after this.